Most issues with the peace plan have been resolved. Donald Trump is trying to stop Russia's advance on the front, and the White House is confident that they can force the Russians to accept security guarantees for Ukraine, similar to Article 5 of the NATO Charter. Ukraine refused to surrender the Donetsk and Luhansk regions and demands the withdrawal of Russian troops from Donbas, a freeze of the front line, and security guarantees. That's a very brief way to describe the outcome of the negotiations in Berlin between the Ukrainian and American delegations. The negotiations continued for a while, but Volodymyr Zelensky did not participate. During the Berlin negotiations, the United States delegation kept insisting on giving Donbas to the Russians. Also, the Americans' logic is astonishing. In particular, it goes like this. Vitkov stated that the president of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, really wants this territory, and that's why Washington is demanding that Kyiv give in. Volodymyr Zelensky refused to withdraw troops from the region he controls, which the Russian Federation still hasn't captured. The Ukrainian delegation stated that Kyiv's red line in negotiations with the United States regarding the peace plan is precisely the withdrawal of the armed forces of Ukraine from Donetsk and Luhansk regions. Ukraine may discuss painful decisions, such as giving up on joining NATO and holding elections quickly, but territorial concessions are the line that Volodymyr Zelensky is not willing to cross. There are also nuances that still aren't being discussed publicly. Meanwhile, the Kremlin has hinted that they are preparing in advance to reject the peace plan being discussed in Berlin. We will discuss all the results of the negotiations in Berlin between the Ukrainian and American delegations in this episode. I'm Alexei Pechi. Let's discuss this topic together. But before we start this episode, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and leave any comment under this episode. Also, subscribe to my Telegram channel Pechi News. The link to it is in the description of this video. There we post breaking news as soon as it comes in. So let me briefly present the statement of the American official right after the talks between Ukraine and the United States in Berlin. He stated that now Trump, who later called Zelensky and the Europeans by phone, is focused on stopping the Russians from advancing westward. Allegedly, the United States is pressuring Ukraine with good intentions to make us cede territories to the Russians. A White House official stated that the United States believes the Russians will accept security guarantees in the final agreement. Trump believes that he will be able to convince Russia to accept guarantees similar to NATO's Article 5. Trump is pleased with the outcome of the Ukraine-United States negotiations in Berlin. The official said 90% of the peace plan's issues are resolved. It sounds funny, even before Berlin. But there is also an important signal. A White House official stated that the final decision regarding the territory will be made only by Ukraine. It has now become known that American negotiators told the Ukrainian side during talks in Berlin that Ukraine should agree to withdraw its troops from the Donetsk region, as part of any agreement to end the war. Immediately after the talks ended, President Zelensky stated that the positions of Ukraine, and the United States on Donbas remained different and uncoordinated. And sources from Reuters and Agence France-Presse noted that Kyiv requested further discussions on this matter. And a second person familiar with the negotiations said that there are still significant disagreements on the territorial issue. Apparently, these are the very same 10 Agence France-Presse, the first to report that at the negotiations, United States envoys Steve Vitkov and Jared Kushner continued to insist on giving up Donbas. And Vitkov and Kushner's arguments are just so rock solid. This is something dictator Putin really wants, so Kyiv should just give in, quote, Agence France-Presse. The agency's source noted, it's surprising Americans are taking Russia's position on this issue. During the negotiations, which lasted more than 5 hours, Zelensky repeatedly rejected the United States' demands to give up Donbas, insisting on a ceasefire along the current front line. According to the American Institute for the Study of War, Russia controls nearly all of Luhansk and about 80% of Donetsk, which together form the Donbas region. At the same time, 70% to 75% of Ukrainians are against giving up Donbas, according to a survey conducted by the Kyiv International Institute of Sociology. And here it's interesting to see how the position of the Ukrainian negotiating delegation has changed. Earlier, it was reported that Kiev had allegedly agreed to consider the option of granting Donbas the status of a free economic zone with the withdrawal of all troops, both Ukrainian and Russian. In fact, it suggests the creation of a demilitarized zone. Some American business interests have emerged, which would serve as a kind of shield against a Russian advance. Publicly, Zelensky stated that it is still unclear who will govern this entire territory. He also stressed that Ukrainians must approve any territorial concessions in a referendum. But after the negotiations in Berlin, Ukraine's position now sounds different. The Americans admitted that they do not understand how and who should govern this demilitarized Kiev Europe, Sutragia. To be governed by an outside party, for example, four very uliteralis. And to back up my words, I'll quote Zelensky. The withdrawal of troops would be tantamount to capitulation. If Ukrainian troops retreat, say, 5 to 10 kilometers, why shouldn't Russian troops also retreat the same distance deeper into the occupied territories? And now the Russians have already started voicing arguments so that even before receiving the peace plan discussed in Berlin, they can immediately disrupt it and refuse to accept it. Yuri Ushakov, assistant to the president of the Russian Federation, commenting on the option of creating a demilitarized zone in Donbas, emphasized that under any circumstances Donbas would remain under Russian control. The entire territory where instead of the army they would deploy units of the Russian National Guard. And here I noticed that while negotiators in Berlin were talking about being close to a compromise on the war in Ukraine, in Moscow they were preparing the ground to refuse peace negotiations. I noticed that statements coming from the Kremlin sounded like a pre-prepared no to any possible peace plan. In particular, this is shown by the interview with President of Russia's advisor, Yuri Ushakov. Ushakov made it clear that Moscow does not intend to give in even a single step. According to him, the Kremlin has already stated its position, and if Kiev or the European Union make any changes to the peace plan, Russia will respond with a strong objection. In addition, experts from the American Institute for the Study of War specifically note that the authorities of the Russian Federation consider any new initiatives on territorial issues unacceptable, including the idea of a demilitarized zone in Donbas. This refers to a key point of the American plan, which originally consisted of 28 points. In its original version, it was assumed that Crimea, Luhansk, and Donetsk regions would be de facto recognized as part of Russia, and the front line in Kherson and Zaporizhzhia regions would be frozen. For Kyiv, this would mean losing territory without any security guarantees, and that's why, after Berlin, this format is no longer being discussed. As a result, the Kremlin has effectively laid the groundwork for rejecting the new peace plan. There have also been changes regarding NATO. On Sunday, it was reported that Ukraine is ready to give up its ambition to join the NATO alliance in exchange for ironclad Western security guarantees. And here, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov stated that Russia's demand for Ukraine not to join NATO is a fundamental issue in the negotiations for a possible peaceful settlement. But after the talks in Berlin, the New York Times is already reporting that the Ukrainian delegation has clearly stated that so far they do not see any security guarantees. They reserve the right to join NATO and certainly will not make any changes to the constitution. Essentially, Zelensky is now balancing on a fine line between demonstrating flexibility for the Donald Trump administration and avoiding concessions that the Ukrainian people might reject. And highlighting the complexity of his position, a sociological survey published on Monday showed that 3/4 of Ukrainians reject significant concessions in any peace deal. A poll by the Kyiv International Institute of Sociology showed that 72% of Ukrainians are ready for an agreement that would freeze the current front line and include certain compromises. However, 75% of Ukrainians consider it completely unacceptable to have a plan favorable to Russia that would involve Ukraine ceding additional territories or limiting the size of its army without receiving clear security guarantees. So right now it all comes down to the fact that the United States must provide real, legally binding security guarantees. And without them, Ukraine is not ready to discuss any territorial issues at all. And in this context, I'll add that already this Thursday there will be a European Union summit where it will be decided whether the European Union can guarantee a loan to Ukraine using frozen Russian assets. In Europe, they admit that the United States is gradually stepping back and the European Union needs to take on all the support themselves. And right now, Germany is the main driving force behind supporting Ukraine today. Chancellor Friedrich Merz stated that in 2026 alone, Germany will allocate 11 billion euros in aid to Ukraine. But that's not the main thing. In the next episode, we will discuss the military pact Ukraine and Germany signed today, which is truly a historic document. So don't miss the next episode and be sure to subscribe here. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments under this episode, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell if you found this episode interesting and got some useful information. You can support our work with your donation or a paid sponsorship subscription to this YouTube channel. All the details and links are in the description of this video where it says support the channel Alexei Peci. Choose any format that is convenient for you. I will be grateful for any support from you. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.